Saints fans, welcome back to the podcast. You finished 5-7, and if there's one thing I'll take from this, it's what I said Thursday. Well, it was accurate. One thing this team has is resiliency, and they showed up. The players deserve a lot of credit, and I truthfully mean that. The players deserve a lot of credit for coming back and trying to make this game a thing for the New Orleans Saints. But Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, it's still, they got to go. Got to. And there are just so many things that are inexcusable, like on the 3rd and 4th and 6, taking Tamm Hill off the field. You cannot tell me that Tamm Hill can't get 6 yards in 2 attempts. You can't. So no matter what, it's still Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael got to go season. But man, I really do believe AK when he said that this locker room and these players are all on one page. And these players, they believe in themselves. So at least the locker room is still there. It was a hell of a game. Just like 007 in the chat says, you can't spot a team 21 points. And credit to the New Orleans Saints for fighting back and making it a damn game. But wow. Let's get some who das those who are here in the live stream. Appreciate y'all. As always, Lester Shipman, Nikki DeFish, Saints Garcia, Henry. Good to see you. 992 Ras 007, Justin Crass, number 4. Good to see you as well. Troy Jefferson, Mr. Wright, Rudy Rock, Rainey, Matt Slay, Raheem Guillaume, Brennan Jack, everybody else. Who dat to you? Welcome in to the show. I don't even know how to really approach. I'm going to be honest. I don't really know how to approach this one. When we do the post-game recap, normally we do quarter-by-quarter recaps. Well, we know what happened in the first quarter. The New Orleans Saints gave up 21 points, like in 7 minutes. And I think it just doesn't matter like what level you look at this. At some point, you have to acknowledge this ain't it. And for me, and I said this during the game on Twitter, surely, Mickey Loomis looks down at this field during this game and can't truly still believe all the right guys are in the building. You know, it says a lot if y'all paid attention. I'm not sure how many of y'all watched the broadcast of this game, that the lower bowl of the Superdome was about 50, maybe even 60% Lions fans, which is saying that Saints fans are selling their tickets on Ticketmaster and StubHub and all these other places and not even going to the games. They're sitting at home frustrated. Y'all are sitting at home frustrated. Right? And it's a combination of everything, right? You know, early on, you had some misses by Derek Carr. I will give Derek Carr some credit, though. He had 15 completed passes before the Bruce Irvin hit injured him. I don't have an injury update on him just yet. He went into concussion protocol. I don't think the concussion is the worrisome. If it's anything, if you looked how he was holding that arm, very locked in, very 90-degree angle, you got to worry that he suffered a pretty serious shoulder injury. I've seen that same look from Drew Brees multiple times. I'm hoping that's not the case for his sake, obviously. But Derek Carr was resilient. And I'm going to add the reason that I think Derek Carr gets a little bit of love from me this game is, and I'm not even blaming Saints fans for this. Saints fans have a completely legitimate reason to not be happy with Derek Carr this year. But every time Tamm Hill comes in the first quarter, cheering. Every time Derek Carr comes back in, booing. And yet he still came out and did one of his better games of the season, right? You can't blame the interception on him. That's on Juwan Johnson, who, man, I hate to say this. I know injury, set him back, but Juwan Johnson's got to be the biggest offensive, disappointment for me because I expected great things from Juwan Johnson. I never expected great things from Derek Carr. And Derek Carr's still been a disappointment, please, no mistake. But Juwan Johnson just, what is up? Like, what happened to the guy who was going to be a top tight end in the league, who looked like he was on a Sam Laporta type escalation? So, I don't know, man. I look at this game and I go, I love the players that this team has. There's so many good moments. FYI, here's your fun stat. Jimmy Graham, with his touchdown pass, because apparently they decided to use Jimmy Graham in the red zone one time, and he got a touchdown again. Jimmy Graham had his 53rd touchdown as a New Orleans Saint. That actually ties him with Dalton Hilliard, 5th all-time in touchdowns in black and gold. So shout out to Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham has now moved into the top 5 as a Saints point scorer that doesn't count kickers and, passers, people who are receiving and rushing for touchdowns and returning touchdowns. I think that's great for him. Chris Olave, dude, shout out to Chris Olave for stepping up. And I think Chris Olave, the mini slump that he has, Chris Olave has definitely come out and performed better. There's a lot of good to take from this game, right? And then there's just a lot of bad. There's a lot of why. I'm not going to sit here and blame Jameis Winston for a loss. I'm not. But I don't think that Jameis Winston should have been put in a position where you're relying on Jameis Winston. And an example of that is, let's go into that fourth quarter real quick. I'm going to get to some of y'all's comments in a second. You've got a second and short situation, and you try to run this reverse with Jameis Winston and a quarterback with Bowden, that's a 6-yard loss. You have 3rd and 6, and instead of going with Taysom Hill, you take Taysom Hill off the field, who just gave you a positive gain, and you try to go 2 straight plays with Jameis Winston, who throws 2 wildly inaccurate passes. And the only big pass that Jameis Winston completed today should have been an interception, and it wasn't, right? So, if this was the preview of what Winston looks like, I think everybody just looks at this and goes, both Winston and Carr can GTFO, but you're not GTFOing any of them. It's just the levels of how this team is finding ways to lose games in this past 2 months is rough. Right? And I said the same thing on Twitter, right? Nothing I'm seeing, even the good moments, has changed my opinion of this team. I love the resiliency of this team. I really do. I love that the players made this a game. I love that the defense said, we've got to find a way to stand up. I love that the offense said, hey, how about we find a way to score in the red zone? And they actually started doing some of the things they needed to do. But between the God's plan throws, the absolutely ridiculously stupid decisions by Pete Carmichael on some offensive plays. And then, honest to God, just shout out Dan Campbell of the Lions for being very good football team. New Orleans lost to a better team. But I'm still standing on the change has got to happen. You're 5-7. Atlanta won today, so you're now a game and a half behind Atlanta. At the moment of us recording this podcast, Tampa Bay is currently leading Carolina. So I am never team tank. I will never say tank. I will still be here against the Giants talking about how we can beat the Giants. I will talk about how we can beat the Falcons when we have to play the Falcons again. I'm going to talk about how we'll beat Tampa, Carolina. I'm never team tank. But your odds of winning are slipping further and further away in the standings as you have now dropped a game and a half below Atlanta. And then Tampa very likely beats the Carolina Panthers today, which will move them into second place because you don't have the tiebreaker with Tampa and you will fall below them into the 3rd place in the division, right? So even if you're not or you are team tank, as Matt Slay says, impressive commitment to losing, they're doing it anyway, right? It's already having that pattern. And a lot of times when we start approaching offseason, we're talking about, well, who should we draft and who should we sign? And the coaching has got to be the focus. And I loved even the early usage of Taysom Hill. And what's so frustrating, and I'm just kind of ranting and venting now. I apologize, Chad. I hope y'all are feeling the same way, or else my ranting is just stupid. How do you use Taysom Hill? He had 17 touches this game. He was an integral part of bringing you back into the game. And then how, in the most critical part of the game, he's literally not even on the field. Not even as a distraction. Not even as a distraction. You took Taysom Hill off the field. Why? He was the only, no offense, Alvin Kamara, who I think Alvin Kamara had a good day today. I think Chris Olave had a good day today. The consistent, always getting positive play was Taysom Hill. All day long. Taysom, doesn't matter if it ran. Now, Taysom did not do a great job passing in his 2 opportunities. That is what it is. He underthrows deep shots. We've always known that. Taysom's going to Taysom, right? That's fine. But he still was the most consistent moving the ball thing for the New Orleans Saints. And in the most critical moment for this team, they take him off the field. And I just don't understand that. I wish he would explain it. And then I hate to go ahead and give you the quote, but I'm going to give you the damn quote anybody like to know? Would anybody care to know what Dennis Allen had to say in his post-game press conference? Well, guess what? I'm going to tell you anyway. Dennis Allen in his post-game presser, I waited a little bit to start the podcast so I could hear some of this. Dennis Allen, I'm going to quote him. He says he's not happy with the loss, but it's encouraging the way his team fought back. He actually said it was encouraging because they got punched in the mouth. He says they'll take the loss and own it. And then he used every Saints fan's favorite phrase, why I haven't put this on a t-shirt, because I could probably sell at least 20 of them. We have to play better. Yeah, well, no shit, Sherlock, you got to play better. You're losing games, you're 5-7, and you've never had a winning season as a head coach. Absolutely no freaking shit. You got to play better. What kind of statement is that? No duh. Yeah, we get it. You suck. Cool. But can we stop saying the same thing every gosh damn? Just say, look, I suck today. I don't care. Say something. Say less words. Say less words. Like, truthfully, just go up to the podium and be like, it's on me. I sucked. Next question. What do you think about this? I sucked. Next question. And my respect for DA would shoot through the mother roof. Instead of this every week, we've got to be better. We got to be better. Somebody on Discord, please ping me. I'm just going to make a t-shirt that's black shirt, gold letters that just says we got to be better. And then I'm going to have like Dennis Allen's like career winning percentage on the bottom or something. Somebody remind me in the Discord. I'm making it today. I'm tired of waiting. Hell, I might make a hat that says we got to be better. And we're just going to wear that hat until DA's gone. It's just a hat that says we got to be better on the top. Y'all remind me. We're doing it. We got to be better. Because that's his damn phrase. And it's fine if you're competitive. But when you have the same things over, and over, it's ridiculous. Why you let a guy like Pete Carmichael, who will have moments where Pete Carmichael's like, okay, Pete, you're not doing terrible. And then you'll have these just the most brain dead, stupid ideas. Really bugs the ever-loving fire out of me. Anyway, let's talk about some of this game. Pass rush still not there. I will give love to Carl Granderson, who was integral on a lot of these big stops. Carl Granderson has not had a sack in 4 games now, but he's still been key for the defensive stops that have been happening. So shout out to Carl Granderson, who is 26. He'll actually turn 27 in about 15 days. So you've got a good 4 years probably of Carl Granderson being a really good player. That's a nice piece to have on your defense. I like that. I'm happy with it. Put his face with that quote and I'll get 2 of the shirts. Saints Garcia, if you can find me like a good silhouette of Dennis Allen, because if I put Dennis Allen's literal face on there, New Orleans could contact me and give me a cease and desist. But you find me a good one I'll make a silhouette out of, got you. Absolutely will. Just remind me right after this show and I'll work on it. But Saints pass rush still not there. It was critical early on for the New Orleans Saints. That was a big part of, 1, they didn't stop the run, and then 2, they couldn't stop the pass. Tight ends are continually killing the New Orleans Saints. Sam Laporta, 9 reception on 9 targets for 140 yards and a TD. He also had the critical backbreaker in the fourth quarter. Just get a picture and outline it. That's what I'm thinking about doing, 992. Thinking about doing it. You know, and it's like Adichie says, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers saw that they just weren't good enough offensively and fired their offensive coordinator when they had a winning record. Now, right now, Pittsburgh is losing to Arizona 24-3, so maybe they regret it. I don't know. But with a winning record, Pittsburgh said, we got to make a change. New Orleans has needed to make several changes. Several changes. And I mean that honestly. Like, you're locked into Derek Carr for 2 years. I'm worried that injury you just saw from him is probably going to be he's missing time injury, but he's going to be the starter next year, regardless. But that doesn't mean that you have to have the same head coach and the same offensive coordinator. It does not mean that. It does not mean that Doug Marrone needs to be the offensive line coach, because the offensive line certainly hasn't played extremely well. You look at the problems that Derek Carr and even Winston in his limited time face. Pressure right there. The run game has really suffered from O-line play not being consistent. You know, Alvin Kamara, we talk about sacks sometimes can be a quarterback stat. yards per carry is often an offensive line stat. And Alvin Kamara, like if you just go look at him statistically this year, you're going to be like, man, Alvin Kamara is really falling off. Alvin Kamara had another game where he had 100 yards from scrimmage. And his 3.6 yards per carry is not his fault, right? Alvin Kamara, again, is sitting here just putting and playing out of his damn mind. Alvin Kamara is having is his best year, I would probably say, in 3 years. That's how good I think Alvin Kamara has been playing recently. But if you looked at his stat line, you would think that I'm just making shit up. But I think this is the best Alvin Kamara has played since 2021. I really do. But if you look at his stat line, honestly, you could probably go back to even 2020. Like, I really think he's playing on that level. But if you just simply go by the stat line, you're going to think that he's like really regressed at 28 years old. No, this team just sucks, and he's one of the few good things on it, right? And what's wild is he got a couple touchdowns today, which I'm very happy for. That gets him 5 touchdowns on the season, passes last year's number because for some reason, Pete Carmichael has an aversion to giving playmakers opportunities in the red zone. Probably a real key there, Pete, on why you managed to get scores today. You went for playmakers in the red zone. I don't know if anybody remembers that, by the way. Last year, Alvin Kamara had only 4 touchdowns the entire season, even though he had almost 1,400 yards. Well, this year he's got 5 touchdowns. 2 of them came today. He actually now has right around 930 yards on the season through 9 games. He's averaging over 100 scrimmage yards a game. And yet, it just feels like they don't utilize him in the ways that you need to utilize Alvin Kamara, right? Now, I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. I know I'm not. Charles Carbo says, I hope they trade AK and Lattimore, regardless of how high the draft picks would be. Want them to have a chance to contend for a championship. So, Charles, I respect that as a fan of players. In terms of team building, that's an absolutely stupid idea. But I respect it because I know where you're coming from. And you're coming from a fan of what those players have done and what they deserve as players. And I totally get that. A front office would never do that. Front offices are selfish. There's a reason they're selfish. They're always going to put the team first. But yeah, I mean, Alvin Kamara is the type of guy, dude, he deserved to have gotten a Super Bowl in 2018. He absolutely deserved it. And the numbers, when all these Associated Press guys go start voting for all pros and all these Pro Bowl votes start happening, people are going to look at Alvin Kamara averaging 3.7 yards per carry this year, and he's not going to get the votes. Alvin Kamara is just as Pro Bowl worthy as a running back as anybody else in the league this year because he's basically putting this team on his back. That is not a good football team. It is just not a good football team. It's definitely not a good offense, and yet he has been an integral part of giving it some level of life, right? Eugene says that comeback big was the worst possible scenario. A blowout loss would have been a truth pill to the front office that you could not gloss over. It's wild because here's the thing. Here's the truth. Here's the skinny, ladies and gentlemen. The skinny of the New Orleans Saints is they have an amazing roster of talent. They do not have an amazing roster of coaches. You know who has a great roster of coaches? The Detroit Lions, which is why they're 9-3. Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, as a group that's doing really well, has modernized their team. That is good coaching. Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, Doug Marrone. These are ancient has-beens, nobodies, never wases. Randall says people still want Winston over Carr. I think people want a new team, like not New Orleans to leave. They want everything to be reset. I don't honestly think most people think that Jameis Winston is the answer. They simply know that Derek Carr isn't. And that's the difference, right? I don't think many people think that. I just think that many people know that what you have right now isn't the answer. And changes need to happen. And if I'm New Orleans, I'm going out and getting a new head coach. I'm going out and getting a new head coach. And Yaya is right. Dan Campbell and Aaron were in our building. Now, I will say this, Yaya, that Dan Campbell left before Sean Payton even left, as did Aaron Glenn. And it sucks, but those guys are part of the Sean Payton coaching tree, and I'm glad that they're getting opportunities, and I'm glad they're having success, right? I truly am. But New Orleans played it safe and stuck with DA, and it is biting them right in the ass. Will any good potential OC even come to the Saints next year knowing there's at least 1 year of Carr? I'll be honest, Matthew, Derek Carr is not what would prevent an OC coming here. And that is not a in defense of Derek Carr comment. I honest to God don't think Derek Carr would prevent an OC from coming. You know what would prevent an OC from coming? A head coach who's never had a winning season. And a head coach who is not a good head coach. That is the problem. That's the issue. And I'm not making an argument that Derek Carr is secretly a good quarterback. If anybody's listened to this podcast all year long, never once have we said Derek Carr is a good quarterback. He's mid-tier, which means that he can be elevated or lowered, but he's never great. Who, if you're an offensive coordinator, especially an up-and-coming offensive coordinator, wants to hitch their wagon to, we got to be better, Dennis Allen? Who wants to hitch their wagon to that? I don't know anybody, right? You talk about Bobby Slowick over in Houston. They actually managed to beat the surging, shout out to, by the way, former New Orleans Saints head coach, Denver Broncos. Houston Texans managed to beat them 22-17. C.J. Stroud, one of the quarterbacks of the future. Russell Wilson threw 3 interceptions. They actually had a chance. They were driving down the field at the very end. I'm not sure if y'all caught the end of this game. They were at the Houston 8-yard line, and Russell Wilson throws an interception in the end zone. Who gets it? Lucas Kroll. Or who he was targeting? Lucas Kroll. Familiar name for Saints fans. So Sean Payton, is doing well up there. But Bobby Slowick, there's no reason he would have come to New Orleans. Of course he's going to go hang out with DeMeco Ryans. Of course he is. Why would he come to New Orleans? If you're going to change the Saints coaching staff, it's got to start with the guy who's in charge. And you start wiping the slate clean. Now, would I say that everybody needs to go? No, but that would be up to the new head coach to decide. But of the Saints' current coaching staff, basically all of them need to go. I'm sorry. It's how many games do you need to see? Dennis Allen can go. Pete Carmichael could go. Ronald Curry, honestly, if the new head coach wanted him to stay, I got no issue with Ronald Curry staying. I like Ronald Curry. Joel Thomas, don't care. He can go. Cody Burns, he can go. Doug Marrone can definitely go. Clancy Barone, ain't no tight end being developed apparently. He can go too. Jari Evans, obviously, I have no issue with Jari Evans. And this is like his first year really like getting in as an assistant O-line coach. I don't blame him at all. I don't have any issue with those guys. Defensively, I have no issue with Joe Woods. I'm not necessarily in love with him. I have no issue. Peter Giunta has been here for a billion years. I do like Michael Hodges. Would like Michael Hodges to stay. Honest to God, would like Michael Hodges to stay. And I think Marcus Robertson has done a really good job with the secondary. But I just listed basically, 5 names out of a 20-person coaching staff that I would be cool, keep them, right? And obviously that would be up to the new head coach on what he wanted to do if New Orleans were to switch it over. But yeah, all that to say, this game proves one thing, and that's that this coaching staff is not good enough. That's what this game proves. This coaching staff is not good enough. Right? NTR says, nothing surprising about the loss. This has been the trend with this team. I wish Loomis wasn't so loyal to these coaches. Same. Jennifer says, and switching quarterbacks every other play will never be successful. They need to find the rhythm. That was asinine. To an extent, there's sometimes I agree with that. Sometimes I don't. There are times where swapping can be really good. And you saw some positive plays there. It comes down to consistency and predictability. And there were some times I think Pete Carmichael did it right. There were some times he didn't. They stopped doing it as much except for like some red zone plays. And you saw Derek Carr do a really good job of moving the football. Derek Carr had 15 completed passes in a row. He was doing well. And then here's where I would have wanted them to do it more. The end of the game. Jameis Winston, who wasn't practicing with the starters all week, who wasn't prepared to start this game, who came in as a backup. Shit the bed. You shouldn't be taking Taysom Hill off the field that time. That man should have been on the field the rest of the game. Absolutely should have been on the field the rest of the game. Alabama could be the Saints. Sorry, Tom. No chance. Saints would put up like 70 points on Alabama. Like, no shot. No college team could go toe-to-toe with an NFL team. It wouldn't even be close, honestly. Like, no college team can come even close to beating the worst NFL team. Like, it's such a disparity there. But I get what you're saying. And the Saints are a bad team. And I would argue that the Saints are worse than their 5-7 record because the 5-7 record is not as good as the coach or as the players are. And it's, the coaching staff is getting the benefit of the players keeping that winning record up a little more than it should be. MT's a bad teammate? Absolutely not. MT's freaking fantastic. We love MT around here. He's definitely not a bad teammate. So it's wild. Maybe 2009. No. 2019 LSU would still whoop the get the ever-loving crap kicked out of them. Even you go back to the 2007 or whatever it was, Detroit Lions that went 0-16. They'd go out to the 2019 LSU in Death Valley and just curb stomp the ever-loving shit out of them. Just as someone who has gotten to work in scouting, let me just tell you, the talent disparity between college and NFL, even a college team that's going to have like 6 NFL players, 10 NFL players, it's not the same as having 53 NFL players. But yeah, that play where Pete pulled Taysom out and ran reverse on 3rd down. Yeah, shout Lynn, and I don't blame Lynn Bowden for that, by the way. It's clearly that, due to injury, because Rashid Shaheed would have got a lot of those plays. Bowden got a lot of Rashid Shaheed's touches this game. And that also meant that he was part of the punt return. And, Lynn Bowden, I'm not trying to be mean to Lynn Bowden. He definitely makes you appreciate Rashid Shaheed as a punt returner. No offense, Lynn Bowden. But, man, that he did not look comfortable. Thoughts on fans booing Derek Carr? I got no issue with it. I think fans have every right to be frustrated with every part of this team. I really do. I think the fans have legitimate reasons to be frustrated with Derek Carr not, perform. I mean, he's thrown 11 TDs and 6 interceptions. Now, I will say today's interception, I would not blame on Derek Carr. But at the same time, Derek Carr, on the play that was the interception, missed a wide open A.T. Perry. So, I mean, how do you want to throw the blame? Juwan Johnson should catch that pass. That's a given. But, yeah, I think there's no issue being upset that Derek Carr, who is DA's handpicked quarterback, is not it, right? I think fans are always fine to voice their frustrations because in the end, the only way, hopefully, upper management hears, the Mickey Loomises of the world, is the outcry of the fans. And to be very, very clear, they hear it, right? Because it is constantly brought up to them all the time. Constantly brought up to them all the time. They know how upset the fan base is, and they know how critical the media has been of them, especially the folks who focus on things like film studies. And that's not just me trying to boost up me and Nick Underhill. I'm talking about, you talk about the NFL world. I'm talking about the JT O'Sullivans, Chase Daniel lately. Everybody, Rob Gronkowski being critical. The people who actually know the game, study the game, and talk about the game. Marcus Spears. All these people are directly calling out Saints play calling and Saints plays of not being good enough. And at some point, the front office just has to admit that this ain't going to work. Now, I will say this. Mickey Loomis in the middle of a season is not just going to start dumping on Dennis Allen unless they're ready to fire him. So I don't expect him to just throw him under the bus. But are you really okay with just doing this over and over again? Are we really cool with that? 504 says, I never want to see Zach Bond in coverage again. Zach Bond was forced to play in coverage because Pete Warner was hurt. It's injuries caused a lot of things that the Saints didn't like. Lynn Bowden would not have been getting reverse touches and punt returns if it wasn't for Rashid Shaheed missing this game. And in so many ways, the New Orleans Saints were a better offense finally. You truly, and I blame Dennis Allen for this. Why do I blame Dennis Allen? I blame Dennis Allen for giving the Lions 21 straight points in the beginning of the first half. Why do I blame Dennis Allen? Because Dennis Allen's team has been coming out and getting curb stomped, punched in the mouth, as he says, early on, and then he adjusts. I'm great that he adjusts. But you cannot give an NFL team 21 free points and just expect to just march on back. You just can't. You cannot do that. And that's on coaching. That is 100% on coaching. As Aditya says, why the Saints always suck versus tight ends. That's on coaching. That is your scheme and failing to adjust to things that are clearly going to be a problem. It's the same reason that they struggle with mobile quarterbacks, and DA's never adjusted to that. This is all on coaching. It's all on coaching, right? So 21 points given up. It doesn't matter if your offense finally went 4 for 4 in the red zone. And thank God that they finally managed to figure out how to score in the red zone. Hopefully they can figure out how to do it next week, because next week's opponent is in theory, an easier opponent. So you had the Lions this week. Now you got the Panthers at home, bounce back game. And then you got the Giants at home, which the Saints, even the Saints, should manage to get back to 7-7. We'll see. Who knows? But I'll say this. If the Saints play like they did today, they'll beat those two teams. If the Saints players play like they do. The coaching, I've lost all confidence in the coaching staff. But the players, the talent themselves are good, right? The talent on the play field itself, inside the lines, is good. So if they play at that level, they'll win the next two games. But this goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago. Who benefits from that? The coaching staff. They're going to get credit for this team somehow being 500. And it absolutely is not because of coaching. That is clearly the biggest issue on this team. Darkside says the issue is not a quarterback, it's Pete play calling. How do you not use Jimmy in the red zone more, especially with good chemistry between Carr and Jimmy for the 2-for-2 TDs? I mean, I do not want to absolve Derek Carr of all blame, because there are Derek Carr problems. They really are. I mean, Derek Carr has misses, but I came into this year knowing there would be Derek Carr misses. At the same time, I have said for now 12 games, Pete Carmichael is the biggest issue on this offense. That doesn't mean that Derek Carr isn't an issue, but the biggest issue on this offense is Pete Carmichael. And I will leave this year saying that. There's honestly nothing that could change my mind unless Derek Carr just goes the next 4 games, if he does play, and just threw 4 interceptions a game. Like if he just started chunking turnovers, like, Thanksgiving turkeys being given out by the Salvation Army, then I would start saying, okay, Derek Carr's the worst part. But Pete Carmichael's been the worst part of this offense for 2 years, and that you just not going to convince me of anything otherwise. You're just not. Mr. Rice says, I think next year's Super Bowl being in New Orleans is playing a huge factor in the coaching staff staying in place. I didn't understand why that would matter. To be honest. I mean, you could be right. I can't look at this team and go, there's any chance for Super Bowl anytime soon at all. JCV says, if Derek Carr doesn't leave the game, we win it. I support Derek Carr on the team 100 or 1,000,000%. I think that's great, JCV. I do think the Saints have a better chance of winning with the quarterback they started with had he not got injured. Sure. I won't disagree with that. That still doesn't change. How long have I been ranting now? Over 30 minutes, what I believe the New Orleans problem is. That doesn't change anything. Even if the New Orleans Saints win this game, you're still prolonging mediocrity because this coaching staff sucks. So Edwin says, could we do a quick overview of what's needed for us to make the playoffs, division winners, and wild card chances? Short answer, Edwin, the Saints need to win of their next game. So you've got 5 more games. They need to win 4 of them. It's still possible to win the division by only winning 3 of them, depending on how everybody else does. You do have to have a winning record. So you need to beat Carolina for a couple of reasons. Number one, you need to have more wins against division opponents and conference opponents. Now that you've dropped to 5-7, your odds of making the wild card are almost gone. It's not impossible, but making the wild card's basically out the picture. Just to show you where the standings are right now for those watching, Dallas is a wild card team at 9-3 currently. Then you've got Minnesota at 6-6. And then you've got down here Seattle also 6-6 with the Rams at 5-6 currently. That's without all the games being finished. Wild card is extremely unlikely, technically possible. So as far as what you need to do, you need to beat Carolina and then you need to beat the Giants. Both of these are important conference games, and one of them is a division game. That would bring you back to 7-7. Then the biggest one, probably the most important game for the New Orleans Saints, is in Week 17 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. If you don't beat Tampa, you probably don't win this division because Tampa has a breaker on you. And then it's very curious to see what Atlanta does, and you probably need to win. So if you're going to lose a game, Week 16, you can lose Week 16 against the Rams. Won't kill you. But you basically have to win Week 14, Week 15, get back to 7-7, and then you have to win Week 17 and Week 18 to win the division. You can technically not have to do that if the Falcons and the Bucks suck. But I'm telling you now, the odds of this are getting slimmer and slimmer. So here's what we can do. I'm going to put up on the screen. If y'all have never used this tool before, it's the ESPN playoff predictor for the NFL. They do this thing every year. So what I'll do is I'll do it real quick just to show you how things are. So we're going to just assume Tampa wins today, right? We're going to assume Tampa wins today against Carolina. So we're going to move to week 14. Let's just say the Saints are going to win because they're playing Carolina at home. We're just going to say that. Now, Tampa plays Atlanta, and y'all can kind of coin flip who you win that one. I think Atlanta's the hotter team, so I'm going to pick Atlanta. But that can go either way. Week 15, Saints play the Giants. They got to win that game. But at the same time, Falcons play Carolina. Falcons probably not going to drop that one. You got Green Bay and Tampa. I would honestly lean Green Bay this game because it's in Green Bay, and Green Bay is fighting for a wild card spot, but that could go either way. Week 16, New Orleans in L.A. That's a tough one, and I don't think Saints run the table, so I'm going to throw them a loss right there. Then you got Tampa playing Jacksonville. That's a real tough one for Tampa. We can say they dropped that one. The Carolina one doesn't really matter. But Colts versus Falcons. Falcons can very much win that game, but let's just say in theory they lose it. Saints are still not in first place in the division because they're 7-8, even at where we're at so far. Now we're in week 17. Saints are playing Tampa. They've got to win this game. If they win it, that puts them in a good spot. But Bears, Falcons in Chicago, you could hope in a prayer Falcons probably win that game, but let's just give it to the Bears. Even if you gave the game to the Bears there, you're still not winning the division because you'll be tied at 8-8, and Atlanta's in the lead. And that's you having to beat Tampa. If you lose to Tampa, your shot's basically out. It can happen, but it's long shot. And then final week of the season, you got to beat Atlanta. And then depending on how things go around the league, you can squeeze in. But based on conference wins and all the seeding, if you didn't beat Tampa, Atlanta would get in at 8-9. So, very difficult to do. Not impossible, but very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. But again, there's a lot of other things that kind of, can play into this, especially given the schedule. Key is the Saints have got to win a minimum of 3. They've got to beat all 3 division games, and they probably need to win at least one more. Basically, you're asking them to go 4-1. There's a shot if they go 3-2. But the odds are getting really, really slim now, y'all. Really, really slim. And with that injury to Derek Carr today, while nothing at the time we've been doing this has been released on the severity of that injury, I'm really worried that it's a severe injury, which means that Jameis Winston's going to be your starter. Is what it is. Fun fact, James Hurst said today in his press conference after the game that he's never knocked a ball loose from a quarterback like he did today, not even in a practice, his entire life. There's your wild, fun, just Saints finding ways to lose stats quotes of the day. So, fun facts. Oh, good times. Good times. How about all? We don't have a franchise quarterback on the team. I don't care who they're starting. There ain't the future. Well, again, Lester, nobody on this podcast has advocated that there's a franchise quarterback on this team right now. Nobody here's advocate. You're not arguing with anybody on this podcast. So, not arguing with anybody on this podcast. Amazing how they find ways to lose. I've, honest to God, can't even tell you the last time I saw an offensive lineman leg force a fumble from the quarterback. I really can't. Matt Slager says, I want to say thanks. Been around since episode 15 or so. Always been good. Why more of a Screaming at the Clouds why session? Oh, now more of a Screaming at the Cloud why session. Yeah, I know, Matt. Look, I still love the film studies, and I still love this podcast. This community that we have built, I hope that we can share in our frustrations and still acknowledge the good. And I've told this story before. Like when I grew up a Saints fan, the way that I enjoyed the games is I had favorite players and I rooted for players individually because I knew the Saints were going to suck. So I stat tracked hardcore. And that's why why I know and appreciate what Alvin Kamara is doing so much right now. I just do. Because it takes me back to when I was a kid, when I had to watch the Saints. And I knew they were going to lose football games, but at least my player was going to play well. Well, shout out to Alvin Kamara, who is, again, going to have another 1,000-yard season. Knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt. It'll be 7 straight years. Alvin Kamara is probably going to end up with 1,300 or more yards from scrimmage. If you're curious, yeah, he's a lone saint to do something like that. The dude's insane. Edwin says, appreciate it. From a defense perspective, why the sudden drop-off? What do they need to improve on in order to get a streak going? Number 1, pass rush is horrid. That's number 1. 2, defending the slot / tight end. Any of that interior movement, whether it's an inline flex tight end or even slot motions, that is where they're consistently struggling. And that also leads to part of their struggles because they try to devote attention to it and they still fail into these mobile quarterbacks. There's a lot with this defense that they do well, but there are glaring holes. The best way I could describe it is, let's say you've got a fence around your yard. Like it's a nice fence, like you just put it up, but some, dickhead named Dennis Allen came through with a sledgehammer and he literally knocked 4 holes in your brand new fence. It's still a great fence. There's just some very obvious holes in it right now. And some of those obvious holes are they do not have the ability to consistently defend against tight ends. They just simply can't press them at the line. They can't get good coverage on them. They can't bracket them. They have no pass rush. It's anemic. Even their best pass rusher is being taken out, usually through double teams and quick passing, and Carl Granderson. They do not do well with QB spy to monitor a mobile quarterback. And now they're also dealing with injury issues. You had Howden starting. You had Zach Bond starting, right? So it's a myriad of things. But there's still a lot of things they do really well. I mean, their quarters coverages between the safeties and the corner play is still very, very good. They still have good spurts, but they're giving up a lot of big plays, and those are the big holes in the fences. And the problem is, I don't really think that they can fix those. I just think that they're there. And some of your best players are just getting older, right? As much as I love Demario Davis, and I give Demario Davis credit for still being a good player this year, but Demario Davis is not what he was 3 years ago. Like Demario Davis, 3 years ago, I would have said was the best linebacker, especially off-ball linebacker in the NFL. Now he's a very good one. Arguably still Pro Bowl level, but he's getting older, and you can tell that he does not carry coverages as well as he used to. He just doesn't. So, Cool Sports Poem says, I think fans starting to make a statement. The stadium wasn't full, plus a lot of the fans that were there seem to be Lions fans. Hope we keep it up. Maybe Loomis will take a hint or lose support. We'll have to wait and see, Cool Sports Poems. Also, share a poem. But Edwin, it was a fantastic question. My only negative is I don't know how to tell you a way that's going to get fixed. I really don't. Because if there is one thing that we know DA is good at, is adjustments. And they've not been able to adjust that. I just don't know if they have the ability to adjust it if it is a high quality player. Like Sam Laporta at tight end is a high quality tight end. And those guys are killing them right now. So, yeah, Cameron Jordan. I love Cameron Jordan. I think Cameron Jordan's one of the greatest players I've ever watched, but Cameron Jordan's at the end of his rope. And I'm not even saying that he's playing bad. Cameron Jordan as a run defender I would put Cameron Jordan as a strong side run defender up against just about any defensive end in the NFL today. I really would. Still, to this day, at 34 years old. But as a pass rusher, nah, man, it's done. I even think he probably still managed to get a couple sacks this year, and he may get up to 5 sacks. He finds a way to do it. I think the Saints offense not giving enough leads has hurt Cam Jordan's opportunities. Cameron Jordan is still pressuring the quarterback, but the best way I can describe it is if you watched the Saints a decade ago and you remember his early years where he was the king of the almost sack, that's where he's back to being. He's actually still putting up good pressure numbers. Like he's getting pressure on the quarterback. It's just that half second that you start to lose, that half step, and he's just not getting there anymore. Tankaton says he's double teamed. A little. Honest to God, Cameron Jordan is not getting double teamed every play anymore. He's not. Does it still happen? Yeah. But no, he really has lost a step. Doesn't mean he's bad. I still think he's a good quality player, but you can't rely on him to be your primary edge rusher anymore. And you got to find a way to do that. Coming out of this game, I think the New Orleans, we'll have to math it out after the game's final out. But I'm pretty sure the New Orleans Saints just dropped to second lowest sacks in the league. And the only sack that you got today was actually from a backup linebacker. Now, granted, this is what he did in college, but Zach Bond. Yeah, and that's what Zach Bone used to do in college. New Orleans hasn't been using that to their advantage the 4 years he's been here, but that's what he did in college. They don't really have anybody consistently. So, yeah, it is what it is. Bodino says, I don't know how often he's doubled at this point because things are getting hard for Granderson. Yeah, Granderson is pulling more focus than Cameron Jordan is. And I'm not trying to trash talk Cam Jordan because he's done so much for this team. I mean, Cameron Jordan in his career has been phenomenal. He's got 117 and a half sacks. That is insanely good, right? He's got 152 tackles for loss. I honestly, God, think that he should be considered for the Hall of Fame. I really do. But is he, dominating? No, he's not. Last year, he made the Pro Bowl, and I think he probably deserved it last year. But his all-pro days are over, and I think his Pro Bowl days are over, and he's down to just being like a good player. And you probably get maybe one more year, and I hope he doesn't just fall off the face of the earth. So, yeah. Don't let this game distract you from the fact that the Lions are frauds, pretenders, not contenders. Nah, Vlad. I love the Lions. I'm rooting for them. They're one of my teams, man. Do I think that they're better than the Eagles or something? Honestly, no, but I'm okay with that. I'm good with rooting for an underdog. I mean, dude, I've been a Saints fan my entire life, so you think I'm going to have a problem rooting for the Lions? Hell no. Go underdogs. Here's the Lions' schedule for the rest of the year, by the way, for those curious. They play the Bears next week in Chicago. So there's your little nice divisional game. Then the week after, they take on Denver at home. So Sean Payton versus Dan Campbell. Then they got the Vikings in Minnesota, obviously without Kirk Cousins. Then Cowboys. That's going to be their biggest matchup that they've had probably since the beginning of the year in terms of like level of opponent. Here, I can just actually click them and show you. So I would say their toughest opponent so far was week 1 when they beat Kansas City. And I do think that mattered. That was their toughest one, and I think they had a good win there. But they got to play Dallas and Minnesota twice. So this is the rest of their schedule. I think Detroit can quite easily end this season 13-4. 12-5. I don't think they're going to get the number 1 seed, but they're still in a position to get the number 1 seed. It's still technically possible. I think that their schedule to wrap up the season is easier than it is for some of the other teams, but yeah. While the key players all on IR at the end of the season, bad juju, luck, voodoo, I don't know, whatever you want to say. It sucks, but it's been like that. And yeah, it is a good game between the 49ers and Eagles right now. And if you're the Lions fan, you're rooting for the 49ers. You need the Eagles to start taking some L's, start fighting for that number 1 seed. But Eagles probably, I doubt the Eagles drop that number 1 seed. I really doubt it. But, yeah. I really am not trying to be a negative Nancy. I promise I'm not, y'all. I love this team. I love the players on this team. I love what this team's doing as players. It's just the coaching staff's got to go. And I don't see how people can look at this coaching staff and say, it's all good. Let's keep rolling with it. So I'm directly calling out Mickey Loomis with that. Like, Mickey Loomis has got to just admit that rolling with DA isn't working, and we've got to do something else. They've got to admit it, and that's all there is to say about it. It's clear that this coaching staff is not it. And if you really do want winning to return to New Orleans on a consistent basis, you've got to go with a new coaching staff. You're proud of Detroit since it came from the Peyton tree? Yeah, I'll be honest, Bodino. I struggle with rooting for Sean Payton himself because of what he did to New Orleans in the last year. But I still root for his tree because all those guys were part of so much fun in New Orleans. I want to root for Dan Campbell to be successful. I want to root for Aaron Glenn to be a great DC and maybe even at some point a great head coach. I want to root for all those guys to have success. And there's more coaches in Peyton's tree that are starting to filter out there. But yeah. Bodina says, I don't think anybody thought we'd win this game. I came into the podcast Thursday saying we were going to lose this game. I said one thing would give this Saints team a chance to win. And anybody that listened to the Thursday podcast remembers what it was. It's the title of this one. It was Resiliency. This team's resiliency is the only thing that gave them a shot. And truthfully, it did give them a shot. They were resilient. They did fight back, and I respect the hell out of the players for doing it. Shout out to all of them. But this coaching staff's just not good enough. And at some point, Mickey Loomis has got to acknowledge it, or Miss Gale needs to step in and make something happen. Got to make something happen. I'm sorry, Miss Gale. I know the Pelicans are your baby, but it's about time that you start giving the Saints. And I'm not saying that she is not part of the Saints, right? But when Tom was alive, the Pelicans were her baby. She loved the Pels. She was always there. Now, she goes to the Saints practices. She's involved with the Saints. But I'm saying that she is an owner and that she needs to take a step in. And more of a step in with the New Orleans Saints. A bigger step with New Orleans. And she needs to call for action. Now, she's always been a woman who cares very much about the people, the city. So I would like to think that she will address these things. But as the owner, she needs to come through and say, what you're doing in this city and what you're doing for these fans is not enough, and changes need to happen. 992 appreciate you. What was the record last year at this time? Great question. So last year, the New Orleans Saints, we are in 12 games now? How many games are we through? Yeah, we're 5-7, so that would be 12 games. All right, so, hey, math is hard. Don't ask. Don't ask. So last year, through 12 games, you had won 4. Technically, you're a little bit better. For those that don't remember, last year, of the final 4 games, you won 3 in a row. So the whole New Orleans needing to win 3 of their final 2 or 4 of their final 5, like I just talked about 20 minutes ago, is not unheard of. Last year, at this same time, the Saints had won 4 games. So they were 4-8. Yeah. 4-8. So can they make a push? Absolutely. If they can get their heads screwed on right. They absolutely can. They did last year. Obviously, it was too little too late, and then they lost to the Panthers 7-10 the final game of the year. But absolutely can. Just will they? I don't know. Either way, it probably saves DA's job. And that's going to be very frustrating for Saints fans to hear. But yeah, you technically are still better than you were last year, but yikes. The fans booed. She'll understand what she's criticized to her face. See, that's tough for me because Miss Gale is such a wonderful person and human, right? Like, I really do believe that Miss Gale is great for the city of New Orleans and great for the New Orleans franchises. But at the same time, she needs to have a little bit more hand in the honey jar when it comes to these teams. Because somebody's got to hold the management accountable, right? Somebody's got to hold Mickey Loomis accountable. And you can't just trust Mickey Loomis because he was your husband's guy for 20 years. You know what I mean? So, anyway, y'all, we're going to be back Tuesday. Cover this. I'm going to try to put through some film. I really couldn't bring myself to do it last week against Atlanta, but this game, I think is a little bit easier to do. So, we'll get into some film. Appreciate it all, y'all. Who dat? God bless. Thank you for always supporting the channel, for always being here. You're all incredible people. You're all incredible community. And we will catch you Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Well, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Deuces, that's me. We outie.